Welcome to another chapter of the Crown podcast. Today we have a very special guest and a great conversation lined up with you. Kieron Achara retired from professional basketball in 2019 after a career spanning almost 2 decades. He is Googleable. If you need to find out what this man has achieved, he's not far away. You probably seen him in the 2012 London Olympics, Commonwealth Games, and more recently as he's transitioned from playing the sport to helping athletes and young people across the country to navigate life after basketball, or even life alongside basketball in all of his campaigning for mental health. So great to have you on the Crown podcast, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. I really appreciate it.
And correction, that's Kieron Achara MBE. All right, so you've had a very well-decorated career as an athlete, but can you just tell us a bit about that journey? Maybe some of the highs, some of the lows, and how it shaped you into being who you are today.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny. I'm 6'9", Scottish, black. Basketball, when people see me stand up, they always say, "Oh, do you play basketball?" But growing up in Scotland, basketball was never in my vision. It was something I didn't even know about any basketball teams other than a little bit later in my career when the Edinburgh Rocks were around. But I just loved sport. Like I genuinely just loved sport, and I was good at sport. I think being taller, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster than most, I thrived in that environment. And because of that, I think acceptance came from that. So I just wanted to be around sport all the time. So I always say basketball found me. I was about 14, 15. And we did it at PE at school. And one of the sixth year pupils at the time, so one of the older pupils asked me to come along to the school team. And we went on and won the Scottish Cup that year. And literally from there, it was just fast forward. It was like everything was just getting thrown at me. Making Scotland team, going to camps, getting invited over to the States. And that's when I found out about scholarships. I went over to a camp in the States, found out about scholarships, and that was it. That was literally a light bulb moment. It was like, how do I make this happen? Education was really big, focus from my family. They wanted me to be the first to go to university from the family, and I thought that would be a great vehicle to do so. So that was my drive. That then became my purpose about how can I focus on that and push forward. So went over to the States, had a great time in the States. Again, the plan was to get my degree, potentially get a job over there. Then we found out about the Olympic Games. So this was 2007, 2008. Told that we were going to host the Olympic Games in London, and we are going to have a GB basketball team potentially. And again, now it was like, oh wow, how cool would it be to be an Olympian? What do you have to do to become an Olympian? Well, you're going to have to go pro. And that was what had driven me to then go professional in the sport. So it was really funny. It was nothing, I had no big NBA aspirations or anything else. It just all just kind of got aligned and kept bouncing around. And it was bringing happiness and drive going through all these different stages. So then went pro. And from there, yeah, the rest is history. I thankfully ended up playing for my country, 105 caps, and get to travel the world and meet great people, and have a great basketball career.
And you see, that's just a great testament to, I guess, being present with where you're at each stage. As you said, you didn't have huge aspirations to play in the NBA as such, but to represent your country, there were building blocks that needed to happen in order for you to be able to do that. And so I just kind of get the sense that you were just being present where you were at each stage in order to get to the next step, rather than kind of foreseeing your whole life plan
Yeah,
out ahead of you.
I was obsessive with learning. Like I'm an extremely curious person, to the point, actually, I think it was a gift and a curse in the basketball sense, because I was constantly looking for improvements.
Mm,
And I quickly realized from a young age that by putting the work in, so first and foremost, asking the questions. So then when you get the answers to the test, then studying, right?
mm,
So I, all the stages through my career, I guess I was lucky to be surrounded by great support mechanisms. So I had some great coaches that I just soaked up and learned from. I was constantly in learning mode. And with that, I started to see drastic improvements. I was most improved in my conference in
mm,
basketball. Most teams I was on, I started on the bench and worked my way up to a starting position, and it
mm,
was just because I got obsessive with the learning piece. Like
mm,
I took great pride in learning. And I guess for that matter, I fell in love with the journey then, because it was,
mm,
so all these things end up happening. I sometimes think about that. If I had set those goals for myself,
mm,
would I have put too much pressure on me to then actually not achieving those things? But actually, because there wasn't a place I was striving for exactly, I think it was a nicer process. Kind of like you said, I wasn't so fixated on the end result, other than the Olympic Games.
mm,
Once I achieved the Olympic Games, we got there, I then fell off a cliff, because it was like,
mm,
in my mind, that was the end goal. Got there,
mm.
was disappointed on with it, because I thought it was going to change my life forever, and it didn't. It was like, okay, that was cool, but that's
What
it.
next? Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, because I put so much into that. Like I told you, obsessed with the learning, all the rest of it, thinking that was the pinnacle. And then it was like, oh, so that was a big learning, big learning process for me as well.
And I think there's some parallels to that with, most people's lives. They don't have to be professional athletes. They could be actors or just, blue collar workers punching in their ticket 9 till 5. They have goals, whether it's to get a degree or to work a certain type of job and get to a certain level. And sometimes I don't know, the adrenaline or the motivation, the inspiration to get to that is so much bigger than what you get when you get there. And then what we tend to have is people, once they arrive there, they're unfulfilled. And now we start to see mental health difficulties and depression and a lack of purpose, feeling as though you just exist, but you're not significant. And I just wanted to know from you, because not everyone has your journey, and very few make it to the level that you have within your career, or your career path. And so, how important do you think purpose is, along the journey for all of us?
I think it's the number one. It's for me, it was the number one motivator first and foremost. And I'll explain that a little bit differently, because I think that there was a big evolution in that purpose piece for me. So first and foremost, when I first started and I was going on my journey, getting my degree, everything else, it was all about making money. Get a degree, get a good job, right? Then Olympics, okay, same thing. Go to the Olympics, play basketball, make money. All right. It was very much intrinsic. It was what I wanted. And as you start to go down that journey, you're motivated, you're working well, you're doing everything else. But then it kind of hits you as, actually, I've got this purpose, I've got this drive, make money, buy a house, buy this for my family, whatever it may be. And then it just hits you. It's like, who's going to support that? Like, who cares about me making money, right? What does that do for anybody else? And so there was a kind of like a light bulb moment when I was in university, and we went through some things, and collectively, I realized that I had a voice. I had a platform. Like I still think it's strange. Again, coming from Scotland, playing basketball was non-existent. I think it kept me truly humble. Um, but I realized that I had this platform and it could be used in a different way. And actually, I got more sense of purpose when I was actually trying to help the collective. And you might talk about, oh, that's great, but it made me feel a lot better as well. It definitely made me feel fulfilled. So that purpose piece, it needs to span wider than just yourself. And I get it. Sometimes people feel that they need to be protected first before they can go in and do things for others. But I actually think it's by doing things for others first, it allows you um, to really fulfill, be more motivated, be more driven, and actually in turn get that support that you need in order to thrive as well. So that purpose thing, like I said, is crucial. And it was interesting too. I read the book Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. It's a small read, really interesting read about Holocaust survivors. And I think that there was a pursuit of happiness that everyone talks about. I want to be happy. I want to be this. A fulfilled life is a happy life. But actually, Frankl had mentioned that meaning is more important than happiness. And some people have quite tormented lives, go through a lot, right? I think about, my mother trying to provide for her kids, everything else. It wasn't a happy life, but it was a fulfilled, purpose-driven life, which the byproduct of that is you feel like you have meaning within that situation. And I think that was a real big learning curve for me as well, because actually I knew that not everything was going to be rosy and filled with happiness all the time. But if I was driven by that North Star and that there was meaning behind it, it was a lot easier to kind of go on.
And in that, that light bulb moment for you was so important, because when we speak about the word purpose, essentially by its definition, it's why something is used and what's its intended purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are talented, they're tall, they could play basketball, or they are really good with numbers or really good with words, and they hone these skills. But for one reason or another, and I'm sure you've come across it as an athlete, you've seen so many talented athletes or young players who get to a point where they're just not fulfilled, because the repetition of it, no matter how good you are at numbers as an accountant, at some point, if there's something not attached to it that's purposeful, if it is just about money, eventually you will burn out. And so I just kind of want to know from you, maybe from an athletic standpoint, you've seen thousands of players who have all the skills, have the coaching, they go to get great scholarships, and for some reason or another, they don't reach their full potential. Feeling purposeless can have one feeling very insignificant, and like you're just a part of the cog, you're just another wheel making something else move, but you don't feel very significant in society. And I wonder, these feelings of insignificance can turn into self-doubt.
Yeah. So again, you're right. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about that purpose, because I've seen players who have, again, it's feeding their family, then they make great money, and it's like
Or
job done.
ego. Or ego.
Ego, yeah, very much so. The drive there, um, ego can be overwhelming. It's actually one of the biggest barriers in sport. I genuinely believe. Um, but yeah, to go back to that whole purpose piece. I think that it's this is all hindsight, because obviously I retired 4 years ago, and it's funny. My there was a lot of, I told you I'm quite a curious person, big learner. Uh, there was a kind of like identity crisis around my transition, because society places this basketball player, Olympian, all the rest of it. That's success to society, and you start to believe the hype that you are successful. And then my wife's a nurse. There's doctors who are asking for autographs for their children and everything, and I'm like, they're literally saving lives every day, and they're looking at me, the basketball player, for and it just got me really thinking about things, about like, who am I? Who actually am I? It's so now I'm former basketball player, or it's hard to walk away from that. And that purpose piece, like I said, because of the external environment and the pressures from society to say you are successful, you are this, you are that, it kind of got me a little check. It was kind of thinking, actually, what does this really mean? And to go back to my point about that thing I learned in college around the amplifying the voices of those who don't get heard because of, for whatever reason, there was more fulfillment within that. And I think it sounds awful, but there's a level of guilt as well. Like when you go on and achieve things, again, like my career, I understand that I put in the work. I tried really hard. But there's also a lot of luck involved. I'm 6'9", 6'10". Basketball makes sense for me. And if I pursued to be a jockey, for example, it probably wouldn't have happened. You know, it aligned perfectly to me, and I understand that there's a lot of things that I am. There was luck involved. Don't get me wrong. When you're given the opportunity, you still seize that opportunity, but not everyone gets those opportunities. Um, so when it came to that bit, finding that fulfillment, having that drive, I made the move back to the UK to play basketball for the last 4 or 5 years of my career. That was a strategic move because I thought that I could have more impact going into schools, going around. It's more palpable. I can be there, give high fives, because I realized that I had this small. It is a small platform, but it can have impact. And those were not from a playing standpoint, but from a life standpoint, the happiest years of my basketball career. And the basketball was a lot lower level, which I missed. I still missed the basketball playing at different levels in Europe. There was a lot of frustration still on the court, but the reach I had off the court, I think it kind of balanced out holistically that I felt more fulfilled once again. And you know, there was an instance in my last year playing. So I retired in 2019. I had always planned to retire in 2020. I wore the number 20. You know, I was thinking that would be a great year to leave. And thankfully, actually, that was the COVID year. So I'm actually glad that I retired a year earlier. But I was told by one of the coaches at the time that I was a terrible leader, um, terrible role model, everything else. And it hit me so hard. Like mentally, I was like so vulnerable, and because I listened to it, and you know, looking back at that, I now look at that situation, and I was more angry that I allowed that to get to me. You know what I mean? But then I quickly realized that was it. That's what I wanted to be known for. I wanted to be this mentor. I wanted to be a role model to others. I wore that with a badge of honor, and someone was questioning that, and it took away my purpose at that time. So I just couldn't go on. I just didn't want to go on. So I think it is really important that people feel fulfilled, but at the same time, there's two ways of looking at it. So the money route, right? Fast money, go in there, build this, build that for to do what I want to do later on in life. I think some people can get away with that. There's a lot of players that I know who I want to play basketball to tour the world. You know, I don't think that's a bad thing. I want to see the world. I want to see people. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to learn more. So there's so many people doing different things for different reasons, and that's okay. It's just that you have to find your own purpose within that. And again, I think if you're wanting support and to make it sustainable, it has to be more than just yourself and what and how you can benefit from that.
You know, what I really get from it is community, and I know you're very proud of your Scottish heritage, and community is very important in Scotland. And I know that that was probably in you, you know, that actually I'm going to go and do all these things, but in my heart of hearts, it is about giving back. It's about passing on what I've learned, as you've described, as hard work and luck. You know, I can pass this on to somebody else. And it's the reason why I asked you to do this chapter of the podcast with us is because, you know, we are passionate about mental health, and the angle that I see you approach it from is refreshing, because typically when we say the word mental health, we associate it with illnesses. We associate it with depression, suicide, um, anxiety, bipolar, all of the conditions that we now have a language for. However, I see you promote positive mental health. And so this is for everybody. This is for those who are not suffering in silence. These are for those who, are happy in their jobs. But, as you know, with, your own personal experiences, things can change just like that. And so how do we create sustainable ways to keep mental health positive, as well as addressing the issues of the negative effects of mental health? And I see you do that so beautifully. And I think we need more of a balance because in a way we have, because of information and language, and we've in a way kind of romanticized the negative symptoms. And while they are important, awareness is very, very important. We have to do more than just speak about it.
Very much so. And again, that's something that people always look at me and say, well, why do you promote positive mental health? Why were you depressed? And I say, no, I wasn't. I've never been depressed. But talking about that last year in basketball, I could have seen that if I'd went down the wrong direction, how easily you can be from. So I'll give a perfect example. People always talk about, and I hear it all the time, it really drives me insane when people say, right, online abuse, right? So a lot of players get online abuse. And if I wasn't strong, maybe that would get to me, and I can understand why it could get to some people. And I was saying, actually, you never know when you're going to be vulnerable. Like you literally never know. So one day you could read a comment and everything's fine. The next day, it can do an absolute turn on you. So I told you I was really quite always in learning mode. When I did my last dissertation, I did it on the athlete transition, the factors that contribute to a successful transition out of sport. And from that, I got to interview a lot of former athletes who'd went through their journey. And I laughed with my professor at the time because I said it was more therapy than it was education. Because now I'm listening to people's stories who have been on the journey that I'm about to embark on, and there was hope. It was like, this is how I was feeling. And it was really quite interesting to me to see. I felt like hope. I can do this. I can go on and achieve other things, and I don't know what it is just yet I want to do, but there's a lot of people, and they did this thing, that, and success for me was at that time, it was just going on and having the confidence to try something new. And it's funny because athletes are very hypocritical in many things, because we always talk about a growth mindset. We are this, we are that, work hard. But actually, we do that in our own environment. When you take us out of that environment, there's that uncomfort can be too much for so many. So we tend to stay within that environment. So
sometimes if you just change their position on the court or change their minutes and rotation, that's enough to put them off balance. More, let alone a whole life change.
Exactly. So that big change. So during my dissertation, there was some common themes, right? So the one was your support mechanism. And I reiterate that at this point, you cannot do it alone. You need to have support, right? And having a support net, you then have to start thinking about who is your support. So as a pro athlete, playing for the GB team, we have our team doctor, we have our sports psychologist, we have our physio. All of a sudden you retire, you stop playing. That support, that's gone. Your support mechanism is now gone. So I'm now getting sick at home, and I'm saying, who do I call? Because as an athlete, a lot of times we're coddled. We're so well supported, so we just have to think about the sport, and that it was kind of debilitating in a way, because I was like, I don't know who to phone, who to talk to, who. So you then start to relearn about your support network. So I was saying I could ask people a question. Who do you go for advice, relationship advice? Who do you go for financial advice? Some people say, it's the same person for absolutely everything. And I'm thinking, do you genuinely think that you should be getting advice and support from the same person for absolutely everything? So starting to know your supports, understand this. So that was the one element it really stood out to me from a positive mental health standpoint. Is being able to have people. So first and foremost, just being able to talk to people. The advanced level of that is actually working out who you go to for what, right? And vice versa. Like I said, if you can't just take, you have to be giving as well, So understand that what contribution you are bringing to the table as well when it comes to that. Then the second bit, which I thought was really interesting, was when I first finished playing, I never realized how important practice was to me. It was like my sanctuary. That was my escape for so many things. So now that I'm not training, I never realized that my mood was low, everything else. I was quite snappy at times. I needed to find something else. So I started running. I ended up running a marathon the year. So it was a little bit of discipline in my life, a little bit of structure, because that's what I was used to. And again, pushing going forward. But it was actually the getting out of the house and being at one with nature. What I quickly realized was I took my headphones off and then I started to listen to the birds chirp, listen to the water. I felt a little bit more connected again. So it was like, you talk about being present. I was literally present within that. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of swimming because swimming helps me focus on my breathing. I'm not like I'm literally I'm not a great swimmer by any means, but being in the water, feeling my breathing, I can't overthink things. And again, it's a great way for my shoulders, everything else. So the physical activity is really important. Obviously, there's levels to that. But being physically active, but actually having something to do. So I know that for some people, they're angry, they're having a bad day, they might go and get on a punching bag, let a lot of their, what's in your toolkit? So from a positive mental health standpoint, what is in your toolkit to think about how do I handle these situations? So again, is it talking to someone? Is it going out? And it's not avoidance, and there was something I'm not philosophical in many ways, but I do a lot of walking up the Munros now, up the hills in Scotland, everything else, and I started to look at things. So I talk about the positives and the negatives. So a lot of people will turn to alcohol, drugs, whatever for escapism, right? And the thing I'm trying to say right now is I'm not trying to escape per se, it's more embrace. So when I go up in the hills, like I said, I go out for a run, I'm not escaping, I'm actually embracing. This is life. This is nature in its rawest form. I'm here, I'm now. This is a beautiful place to be. So now it's kind of combating that mindset of how do I escape to say actually how do I embrace? And that's what I've been kind of working on right now, that there's a lot of things that allow me to embrace the now and actually how beautiful life can be. I do completely understand that there's a lot of people who do not see it that way, but how do we work on that to allow ourselves to embrace that and be accepting of who you are? And that's again the positive mental health piece. That's why I really try and promote as much as possible, that let's try and work on not allowing us to get to a place that is very hard to get out of. And I do completely understand that mental illness is a complete different kettle of. I hate people who say, if you just do this, or if you just exercise, or if you just eat the right foods, it's a very complex beast. But for a large majority of people, doing certain things can actually help them be in a better state of being a lot more.
You spoke of once you were transitioning out of sport, you had that question of like, okay, who am I? I've been doing this for however long, this many reps every single day, this routine, and now it stops. A lot of people can lose themselves at that point, but because of this purpose you feel you've had within you, you've been able to change some of those habits that you already had into other areas. And I'm sure you tried things and you're like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah,
It's trial and error. It's not that you've known it all, but it's it's not that you're changing who you are. It's just you're discovering other areas of your life that maybe you couldn't see because you're in the gym, so you couldn't hear the birds singing,
yeah,
and you were running indoors, so you couldn't run
yeah,
marathons. Your preseason is about sprints, not
yeah,
marathons. And so it's just that constant evolution. And it is with athletes, is you're kind of like um considered old while you're still young, you
yeah.
know, but there's so much more life ahead of you. And I guess it's that exploration of, okay, who is Kieron Achara beyond the sport? When you first started playing, it was very different motivation. By the time you got to the end and you have a family, it's so my kids can see me play, and it's very, very different. And so now when you stop, your kids have to also learn a new version of you.
So I think first and foremost, the talk, LeBron James tends to say, more than an athlete, right? I think that it's more than a job title, right? So you have to kind of take a step back out and say, well, right, what am I? You might say, okay, I'm an accountant. Oh, well, actually, you're a brother, you're a father, there's all these different things that you are that make you who you are, right? And I think that takes, for a lot of people, again, because you're constantly getting told who you are. You're not actually getting to think for yourself, like, what am I? I always think that for me, the interesting thing was going back to do my master's. It wasn't that piece of paper, for validation. It was doing something different, not being great at it, and seeing improvement again. I noticed that, okay, in sport, that was my journey. Couldn't shoot, worked on it, got better, could shoot. All right, got better, got better. You know, Going back to university, not great in academic writing. First time, get better, go on this journey, and I see improvement again. Right. My bit that I genuinely believe is so important is we do stretch our comfort zones and we do try new things, and you focus on getting better within that, realizing that you're not great at everything, and that self-improvement is a complete journey, right? So there's so many people I'll see who, basketball is a perfect example. Someone shoots, a little kid will go to a little camp, shoot the shot, misses the shot, drops his head. I can't do this. It's terrible. Basketball's not great. All excuse under the sun. And I'm saying I was a professional shooting 400-500 shots a day, right? And I still miss, but I put the work in. So there's no escaping that. You're going to have to put the work in. That's inevitable, right? But what makes it easier is the realization of why you're putting the work in. All right. So what are you doing? So I think it's really, really important that you become more than your job title, and you live in a life that is more well-rounded. There's different things, and there's a realization that you're doing different things. I did some work in some football academies, and there was we had to draw a diagram of like it's like a 24/7 thing, and it's kind of showing your day, and they were guessing how much they dedicate to football. And they all drew this picture, and it was, like 3/4 of it was football. But then when you actually broke it down, it was like, well, you're sleeping 8 hours, you're then breakfast, work. They were only playing football 2 hours a day, but in their minds, all they did was football. So think about that from a work perspective. You work. Some people work their 9 till 5. They have the weekends off, everything else. You're a lot more than just your job title. It plays a big role in your life, but it's not who you are. It's not just what you are. And I think with that kind of mindset, it prepares you for change. Because if you live your job title, so in basketball, you get injured or you get cut, you get released. on work, you get laid off, made redundant, whatever, COVID, a lot of people changed. It was like, right, actually, I am me. I have learned this skill set. I have worked on this. I've worked on that. I can do that again. That's the mindset that I want people to adapt to. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be disappointment and fear and feeling uncomfortable, but actually that ability to just keep going. And that was another big thing about my journey when I retired. That, again, I got to talk to a lot of people, and I talk about maximizing my network. I think that, again, very fortunate because of who I was in my sport. I got to talk to people that most people wouldn't get a chance to, and I took that moment, and I was asking people about their journeys, and there was no journey it went, straight up and down. It was all did this, didn't like that, got lucky with that. Everyone's journey was up and down, right? But the ability just to keep going was it, and I said that, what would you rather have, being a top athlete or got a top job or whatever for 3-4 years, everyone thinks you're amazing, then you hit rock bottom, and then the next 30-40 years of your life you're not doing anything and you're still living in the past. That's success for me, is the ability to just keep going. And that's in its purest form, in my opinion. And that's, again, that's why sometimes I hate going into schools, because I realize that not everyone's going to be an Olympian, but you don't need to be an Olympian to have success. And I don't think all Olympians are successful. So so it's this mindset of actually doing what you can, trying to do better for others, and the ability to just keep going. And I think that's, for me, that's the success in its purest form.
And in doing so, I guess we come back to meaning. So as you
Yeah,
said, not every child that you speak to in a school will become an Olympian or to do what you've done, but they can go on and be successful in their own way. And it may not be something that's glamorous or advertised on social media, but if it gives them fulfillment, then that's a success. And that's the meaning of purpose, them having that why they do it, and they are totally dedicated to that and happy with that. I think that's probably a better message to teach than the kind of peer pressure. You can do it, you have to work harder than everybody, and if you do this, then you'll get here, then I can take you to here.
yeah.
And that's just not the real story.
There is a little element of that I need to harp upon, all right, because having that fulfillment and purpose is a privilege in itself as well. I can tell you right now that not everybody in their work will have the privilege to find a fulfillment in the job itself. And I was very fortunate in a basketball sense that I loved what I did. But where you can find the meaning is why you're doing that work. So there's people out there who are grinding, doing everything that they can because they want to just feed their kids, or have a home that to call themselves. That is meaning. The thing is, a lot of people, I think, preach the fact that you should find a job that's just got so much purpose and so much this and so much that. Not everyone has the luxury to be able to do that. I've had situations that, I look at my own situation with basketball, even me going to get my scholarship. My mother allowed me to go on and get my scholarship and go into university. Now, I have friends that their families couldn't afford for them to go into university and wait for 4 or 5 years. They needed to provide for the house then. I'm not saying that, everyone should have just done what I did, and they should, what I mean? Because not everyone, again, there's a lot of barriers out there. So that meaning, purpose piece, it's maybe not in the job itself, but actually what is it contributing to? And I think that's quite important for a lot of people.
And I think one of the criteria should be, does it help me to prioritize my mental health?
Mm.
and as you said, not everyone's has the luxury of choosing, the most therapeutic type job. But if you do work in a very stressful environment that creates the opposite result, what are you going to do when you clock out? What
Exactly.
things are you going to do to create the
Yeah,
balance?
how do you offset that?
Because,
Yeah,
because otherwise you just, as you say, you define yourself by your job. You come home, you still have the emotions of your job, and then you have to be a parent or you have to be a support system to somebody else. But deep down, you're going through so many things you haven't spoken about, and there's no time to speak about it because before you know it, you're back there again. And I think it's really important, and you've shown this, and I think the life of an athlete shows this, to create space for things that will cultivate healthier way of living.
definitely.
Um, and so I'd like to ask you about your MBE, because considering this wasn't a goal for you, do you think you were rewarded because of that purpose piece, because you dedicated yourself to doing something that was bigger than just what you could accomplish on the court?
So again, mixed emotions with MB, right? Because like to me, it genuinely was a bigger recognition. So, so it was the work I was doing within the community. That was quite gratifying to get, acknowledged for that. But then I think of all the mentors I've had who have been in the community for years, right? But because they never had the the platform, they're not getting rewarded. So there was again another element of guilt, and the way I justified that, and there's always having to find ways to justify it, was again me showing this using my platform, maybe allow others to start thinking about what they're doing, again from an athlete standpoint, I genuinely believe that there is a high amount of people who are literally just doing it for themselves. I'm not questioning that. I just feel that if they had that, if they were powered by purpose a little bit more, they could just do so much more with that. It could have so much more impact. And I do see the evolution of that in sport. I think now, actually, I think about business as well. It's not enough just to be a good product or a good business anymore. You actually have to have some purpose behind you. I think society is now challenging you to think, well, it's great that you sell this or the product's cheap, but what else are you doing? I think there's been a seismic shift. So for me, yeah, that it was rewarding. It kind of again gave me a little bit more confidence and validation of I'm doing something right. But at the same time, it was just like there was a little bit of because I know like there's so many people out there doing amazing things. But at the same time, if if I was doing it to get an MBE, I probably would never have gotten an MBE. It has to be organic. If you're only doing it to get recognized or to get noticed, that you probably wouldn't have that success within that.
Yeah, and I think it's a phenomenal achievement, because with you talking about that transition, you had this passion to help other people, and so you weren't playing anymore. And I guess the reward for playing are championships, right? Scoring titles and numerical measurements. And on the other side of the next chapter of your life, you're rewarded for the same work, the same dedication that you put in to the sport, you put into helping other people, and particularly with their mental health. And so you're rightfully rewarded for that too. And I think that's phenomenal. And you mentioned that there has been a change in the knowledge, and you're someone who loves to learn. The languaging around mental health, it's extremely advanced for where considering how young mental health is in terms of research. And so just being able to put names to symptoms and names to experiences, and one that's been coming up quite a lot, and I've been trying to correct people, is refraining from saying committed suicide, rather died by suicide. And I think this is moving us forward in the right direction. And I just want to know from you, how important do you think languaging is within the career setting, within the workplace, within sport?
It's 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 extremely important. And you talk about stigma. We still have this mindset of strong or weak, and athletes are, it's not just athletes, but just people in general have this mindset of, you're feeling low, you're needing to talk to someone, you need support, you're weak, you're doing well, this, you're strong. And it's horrible to see the language around things, the psyche. I think there's still work to be done, because I also said that unearthing things is only the start of the journey as well. Because the realization is people are now speaking up about certain things. Actually, what you're going to do next, when people realize that it's been around for a long time, it's been completely bottled up. And that's what I'm starting to find. We're now getting people who are a little bit more comfortable speaking up, talking. But now that they've spoken, it's the panic sets in, because they don't know how to handle these situations. People are seeing this differently. I had a friend who had mentioned that they were struggling, and the coach persisted to bench the player, not to play him, because he thought it was the best thing for him. But actually, the most important thing to that player was to be on the court. So they were feeling that they were getting punished for being open, So what kind of message does that send? So yeah, I do believe that the language is a work in progress. I think though, with that language, it's not just the language, it's the actions that come with that. So I still believe that there's still a mindset stigma that it's this strong and weak piece. And we need to continue to work on that to say that is definitely not the case.
Yeah, and as well with languaging, it's such a tricky situation because we all consume things differently. We come from different cultural backgrounds. We have different access and um, different levels of approaching or seeking help, and it's not as always as easy. You see the campaign speak out,
Yeah.
don't suffer in silence, but it's not always easy to access some of the support. And I just wonder, are there any organizations that you've worked with or that you work with that you could recommend in terms of a first point of contact if someone is struggling to get the help they need or to be heard?
Yeah, so in Scotland, there's ch.18 is Scottish mental health charity. I've done some work. I actually ran that marathon on their behalf. From an athlete standpoint, I do work with a charity called Switch to Play, and they're helping athletes for life through and beyond sport. And I love what they are, because again, it's going back to that mindset of speaking to like-minded people who have went through similar things to yourself. And there's Black Thrive as well. They do some great work in England. And yeah, my thought that internet's an amazing thing now. Like, it can be a very negative thing, but can also be a real enhancer. The thing is, I found Switch to Play by going on Google. I literally went and seeked that. As there athletes, I can't be the only one experiencing this. And I found them. So I would suggest that people do that. Try and find like-minded groups that are going through similar things. I look at the work that a lot of young carers do in Scotland as well. There's young caring communities who now get to come together and speak about their situations. And the work I've been doing with Frog, the work, it's amazing to actually hear those voices and understand that you aren't alone. And in some ways, you said it can be very difficult to speak up at times, and not everyone has the same support systems, everything else. But actually listening to other people who are going through similar things to yourself, even if it's on video form, is so powerful. Like, because I think it's a reminder that you really aren't alone. You might not feel like you have someone to talk to right now or anything else, but people are living what you're living as well, and those people can understand better than anybody. So it's yeah, those are the charities that I've done some work with. It's great to see, but I would suggest that social media, social media, like internet, going on Google and just literally thinking about the things that you're going through and looking for those kind of support mechanisms.
And I think that's some really great advice in terms of, it's not always easy. For some, they're not struggling with their mental health. They only want to enhance it. For others, they are at the lowest of low. But the common thread that you see is that you have to be willing to try and do things for yourself, whether it's just to get some fresh air or it's to just create a routine that is more comfortable for you until you're ready to step out of your comfort zone. There are actionable things that you can do to improve your mental health from day to day. And so I'd like to conclude. I typically finish with this type of question, but I want to keep it framed within the topic of today of purpose and positive mental health. There may be someone listening to this right now who's on the verge of giving up. They may feel purposeless. They may feel a lack of self-belief, or that they are more talented than the results they're seeing in their lives. They may have great ideas. They may just feel like they're hitting a barrier and there's no way out. What advice would you give to this person?
So I guess first and foremost, it was always that every life is worth, is worthwhile, and even it sounds hard, but even if you cannot see anything that you can bring, you can always support someone else, right? I genuinely believe that there's always there's always ways of finding that meaning, and I think that the easiest place to start in that situation is to go out and actively try to help others. And I will also say that when I'm looking at these situations, you have to be brave enough to ask for help, right? You genuinely have to be brave enough to ask for help, and that can be extremely difficult for so many, but it needs to be done. So if you feel that you are lost, please go and seek help. All right, please. And for others who are just feeling a little bit unfulfilled, just think about where you can add value. I always talk about embracing your uniqueness. That's the thing I always talk about. We are all made differently. We all have differences within our life, and that's a positive thing. It's good to be different. Where can you try and add value? And for some, it's very basic. Just giving someone a smile and saying hello, that can be enough in your day. So it's also, I always say it's quite a I hate giving advice. I absolutely despise it, and I'm doing that right now. But it is imperative that you are checking in with yourself, you're understanding that, and you are seeking the help that you need.
Sound advice. And I hope that if you're listening and that is you who has been described, that you take some comfort from that, and that can help you to navigate your today. Sometimes that's as far as some people can see. And for those who are a bit further on their journey, I hope that Kieron's story of never settling, can really inspire you into the next chapter of your life, and that you can feel fulfilled and find meaning and purpose in the next chapter. Thank you so much for sharing everything you have today with us. Thank you for your time, sharing this space with us. A lot of amazing things were shared, and we hope it helps somebody.
Appreciate you, Steve.
Thank you all for listening. Until next time, stay blessed, and I wish you better days.